So have you ever seen those memes, and it's like in a European forest, and it's all fairies and gnomes, and it's cute and happy-go-lucky? You know, everyone's just having a good time. And then you juxtapose that with the American forest, and it's horrors the human mind can barely comprehend. Well, apparently, that's real. So, I have in front of me, bit of a paper pop here, the American urban legend Iceberg. Now, if you don't know what an iceberg is, it's what killed Jack and Rose, R.I.P. But, most importantly, it's a way to format information. So, the top of the iceberg is stuff that's super well known, thank your Bigfoots, Area 51, and the bottom of the iceberg stuff is really strange, very niche. So, if you don't know what an urban legend is, let me paint you a picture really quick. Imagine you're a child, maybe 4th grade, 5th grade, and you're playing on the playground. You're having a great time with all your friends, but all of a sudden, you get invited to your best friend's sleepover. Hooray! Good for you! So, you go to the friend's sleepover, you eat some pizza, soda, whatever it is, but then everyone goes off to the bathroom. And you're thinking, oh no, this is where they're gonna make me do drugs, just like my parents warned me about. But instead, they pull out some candles and they start chanting something in the mirror. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. Now, of course, before the third and final chant, they all chicken out. And you, of course, are now part of that group. So now, you're 23 years old, and you have no idea whether it's real or not. And you don't think Bloody Mary's real, but like, it definitely could be, and you're not exactly eager to try it because, you know, do you really want to invite that stuff into your life? But at the same time, it's still probably not real though, right? So it probably wouldn't even matter. But maybe it is real. And that's kind of the essence of the urban legend. Urban legends are these stories that get passed around where, sure, a lot of them probably aren't real, but there's always that chance that they could be. And that's what makes them so fascinating and such a big cultural piece within the United States of America. And really, the world. And we're gonna go ahead and get kicked off with Sasquatch, better known as Bigfoot to a lot of people. This is probably the most famous urban legend of all time. You definitely know this guy, and that's why I'm not really gonna go that deep into it. Because, like, come on guys, come on, it's simple. This is one of the most simple urban legends of all time. A giant ape-like creature, usually 7 to 10 feet tall, covered in hair, and roaming the Pacific Northwest for some reason. There's thousands of movies, TV shows, whatever. There's a show called like Bounty Bigfoot or something, where they go out and make fools of themselves in the woods. It's a funny show. Watched it as a kid, a really good time actually. There's also the Patterson-Gimlin film. This is the thing that really kicked off the whole craze of Bigfoot. But it's such a big cultural icon, you almost can't go anywhere within the western United States without seeing some Bigfoot sign up on the road, or a Bigfoot plushie, or a Bigfoot t-shirt at a gift shop. They're everywhere. And that's what makes them probably the most well-known urban legend of all time. But we're going to go ahead and move on to the next one. So, here's a question for you, dear viewer. What does Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, and Kurt Cobain have in common? And if you know the answer, you probably know what this next one is. It's that they all died at the age of 27. The 27 Club is the next urban legend, and it's definitely weirder in a sense that it's not necessarily a legend or less of a legend, more of a strange coincidence or even possibly a conspiracy. I've definitely heard the conspiracy before, and I'm sure a lot of you have as well, that some of these people perhaps sell their soul to the devil in order to become famous, but they have to die at the age of 27. So they can never live out their entire life. How is this true? Only God really knows, but it's a very weird one. 27 is commonly seen as a burnout age for a lot of people, including these musicians. It's a very strange system, and there's probably no conspiracy to it, but at the same time, coincidences do breed conspiracies. So, there you have it. The next thing on the list tops just about every single conspiracy iceberg ever, and it's because it's probably the most well-known and famous secret military base on Earth, which is a bit of an oxymoron, but we're talking about Area 51. And for decades, the US government would straight up just refuse to admit that it existed until Obama did in like 2014. Which a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, of course, they finally admit it. And of course you have the Area 51 raid, which happened in like 2019, which ended up being more of a group hangout session in Nevada. But the base is located near Groom Lake, Nevada, deep inside restricted airspace. You can't even get that close to it, you can't fly over it. Warning signs explicitly authorize deadly force for trespassing, and that stuff alone fuels myths. The alien connection really takes off in 1947 with the Roswell incident, which we'll get into a bit more later, but that's where the alien connection comes into play. People started thinking about crashed UFOs, alien bodies, reverse engineered spacecraft, and experimental technology that's ahead of its time. For years, whistleblowers and conspiracy theorists claimed that the government was testing alien craft there. One of the most famous is Bob Lazar, who said he worked at a nearby facility called the S4 Reverse Engineering Gravity Defying Propulsion Systems. Bit of a mouthful, but thank you, Bob. He described hand scanners, antimatter engines, and alien materials long before sci-fi popularized the full ideas. There's also the really creepy, weird radio interview. I'll probably play a little bit of it here.
Online, you're on the air. Hello.
Hello, Art.
Yes.
Hi. I don't have a whole lot of time.
Well, look, let's begin by finding out whether you're using this line properly or not.
Area 51.
Yeah, that's right. Were you an employee or are you now?
A former employee.
Former employee.
I was let go on a medical discharge about a week ago. I'm sorry, the government knows about them. And there's a lot of safe areas in this world that they could begin moving the population to now, Art.
But they're not doing anything.
They are not. They want the major population centers wiped out so that the few that are left will be more easily controllable.
Discharge.
I started getting...
In some way, something knocked us off the air, and we're on a backup system now.
It's the government, or
I don't know.
it has to be something, though.
Where the guy essentially calls into a very famous radio station, coast to coast, and he's explaining stuff about aliens and Area 51, when out of nowhere, the radio station just gets cut off. Fade to black. And of course, he calls back later when the system gets back up and says that it was all a prank, but a lot of people don't think it was. And this just all adds fuel to the fire that is Area 51. And I will say, on that coast to coast one, I did listen to the full broadcast of that. A lot of people called, a lot of people said different things. Almost 99% of it was probably completely untrue, but that call in particular is interesting and creepy. But the base is now known to be test grounds for advanced aircraft, including the U-2 spy plane, the SR-71 Blackbird, early stealth technology, stuff like that. And most people don't think that Area 51 is home to aliens anymore. But it's still one of those things that just fuels the imagination of the American psyche. And it's something that's really cool. I mean, it's been mentioned in movies, TV shows, video games, including the most recent example I can think of. In the Fallout show, the Brotherhood of Steel takes over Area 51. And there's an alien there. So who knows? Maybe it is harboring a bunch of alien technology, or maybe it is just a secret base. Now for a real classic in my mind, Bloody Mary. And Bloody Mary had such a grip on children my age. It was probably the most widespread urban legend that we talked about on our playground, and it was definitely the scariest one. But the concept is really simple. You stand in a dark bedroom, you look into a mirror, you say Bloody Mary. I've heard all the numbers. Sometimes it's 3 times, 5, 7, I've heard 13, I've heard 6 before. Really, I've heard every number. But you know, if you do the ritual right, something appears in the mirror looking back at you. And normally it's Bloody Mary, right? So sometimes it's there, you know, it's in the mirror behind you, creepy. Sometimes it's just in the mirror. It's not standing behind you, it's your own reflection becomes Bloody Mary or something. Sometimes it screams, sometimes it scratches you, and other times, I've been told, it pulls you into the mirror world, or wherever the hell that is. And sometimes it straight up just kills you, immediately. So yeah, some people say you have to have candles out there and light them in like a certain pattern. Some people say it's only at midnight or 3 a.m. Some people say you're not supposed to stop once you start, because if you don't complete the ritual, then she can enter through the mirror. And Bloody Mary is just a weird urban legend in general. It's kind of a messy one. She's likely the fusion of several ideas. Queen Mary I of England was nicknamed Bloody Mary for religious persecutions and so much old divination rituals where young women would look into mirrors to see the future, like future husbands. And then there's just good old-fashioned dares of sleepovers, like was mentioned in the anecdote I gave you earlier, just meant to scare kids. Bloody Mary is really a fascinating one, though. Staring into a mirror in low light for long enough can cause minor hallucinations. Sometimes people's faces distort, shadows will move, and your brain will fill in gaps. Add fear and peer pressure and the darkness, sometimes people genuinely believe they saw something. And that's kind of why the legend survives. You just have to experience it for yourself, which again, I won't do. But Bloody Mary sits high on the iceberg because she's super accessible. Almost every kid I knew, and people have asked about it in general while doing research for this video, know about Bloody Mary or straight up tried it themselves. And I think that's pretty cool, given the fact that I, again, as a 23-year-old, am still a little nervous to try it. Which shows how legendary this urban legend is. So now we move on to that Roswell story I was hinting at earlier. Roswell is probably the most famous UFO story of all time. In fact, if you go anywhere near Roswell, or really just New Mexico in general, you're gonna see UFO stuff. Things like souvenirs at gift shops, signs on the side of the road, things like that. They've really marketed the whole thing well, especially in Roswell, New Mexico. So in 1947, a UFO supposedly crashed in Roswell. Debris was scattered across the desert, metal fragments, strange materials, things witnesses say they've never even seen before. The local military base investigates, and then they say they recovered some flying disc. National headlines run, people go crazy, like, what the hell does this even mean? Then almost immediately after that is published, the story changes. The military says, oh shoot, our bad, it was just a weather balloon. It wasn't anything crazy, don't look into this too hard. And then they have pictures with officers posing with mundane debris. I have a picture of it here. But a lot of people don't buy it. Witnesses later claim that they were threatened into silence. Some people say that the debris couldn't be cut, or burned, or bent. Others claim they saw small bodies recovered from the crash. Non-human, child-sized with large heads and strange eyes. Decades later, the government updates the explanation once again. It wasn't just a weather balloon, it was a super serious and special weather balloon called Project Mogul, a top secret surveillance program using high altitude balloons to detect Soviet nuclear tests. Which could explain the secrecy, but not the flying disc headline and not why the story kept seeming to change. And that's why Roswell endures. It's just the classic UFO story, the crash, the recovery, the immediate admission, then sudden retraction and long-term silence. These things build up legends in our head. And whether you believe the idea that aliens crash or not, Roswell matters because it introduced the terrifying idea that the government might tell the truth, but then they'll try and cover it up and lie about it. Almost like 1984, you know? And that's why Roswell sits near the top of the iceberg. And now we're getting into another great one. Jimmy Hoffa. Specifically his corpse, though. Jimmy Hoffa was a prominent Union Teamster. He was the leader of the Teamsters, a very powerful guy. And he was deeply connected with organized crime and politics and backroom deals, specifically with the mafia. By the 1960s, he was one of the most influential people and dangerous men in America. He even went to prison for judge tampering and jury tampering and fraud. Oh my gosh. But he got out pretty much immediately and tried to reclaim power. But that was his mistake. On July 30th, 1975, Hoffa went to a restaurant parking lot near Detroit, Michigan, to meet with well-known mob figures. He was seen, he made phone calls, he got the car, and then he was legitimately never seen again. They never found a body, there was no crime scene, and there was never even any arrest. From that moment on, America collectively asked one question. Where is Jimmy Hoffa buried? Because obviously he was dead. And the answers get insane. There's popular theories that they buried him under the Giant Stadium in New Jersey. That he was encased in concrete at a construction site somewhere. Or that he was cremated and dumped somewhere, fed to animals, or dissolved completely so nothing could ever be found. The FBI has dug up fields, they've searched landfills, they've drained lakes, and they've followed deathbed confessions for decades. But nothing has ever been found, which only strengthens the myth. It's such a crazy urban legend and such a crazy myth that there are some private people who've talked about connections with Jimmy Hoffa. The most famous one I can think of, the Iceman. Very famous hitman. Kind of looks like Louis C.K. Anyways, he's one of the people who've claimed to be a hitman for the mob. How true is all that? No one really knows, but he does claim that he killed Jimmy Hoffa, and that he's part of some car now in a scrapyard somewhere. It's crazy. But this one's a weird urban legend because it's real. Jimmy Hoffa was a real person. His enemies were real. The motive for murder was pretty obvious, and people wanted him gone. The urban legend is just, where the hell did he go? Now this next one is also super famous. It's also really weird to me, because it's Skinwalker Ranch, by the way. It doesn't just do skinwalkers, like that's its own thing, right? It kind of does everything. It's weird. Like, if this was a fake story, which it probably is, but who knows. These people were just throwing random stuff at the wall to see what sticks, and it's actually crazy. So this ranch, Skinwalker Ranch, is a remote property in Utah's Uinta. It's probably Utah Basin. Ute Basin? I can't read these words. But the point is, the place is steeped in Native American lore. As for the name Skinwalker, that is a figure in Navajo legends that is a witch capable of shape-shifting into animals. And even mentioning them is traditionally taboo, bad vibe. And the name really does give the place a bad vibe. Also, I've been saying the word Skinwalker a lot, so if I disappear before the next video, you know why. But these things escalated in 1994 when the Sherman family, who owned the ranch at the time, and had just bought it, reported a non-stop barrage of just weird events. It kind of started with this giant wolf-like creature that showed up, and it approached their cattle in broad daylight. The animal even allowed itself to be pet. It was really just a very, very strange situation, but ultimately it began attacking a calf. So the family decided to shoot at it at close range, but apparently it showed very little to even no reaction, and only after they shot it again and again did it retreat into the woods, and that's when everything really started. After this, there came a UFO sighting almost nightly, large orange portals appearing in midair, poltergeist activity within the house, so things were just getting thrown and moved around, voice mimicking the family members, cattle were just found dead in strange ways, sometimes with surgical incisions drained of blood completely, and whenever they tried to investigate something, it all seemed to escalate. It was almost like a sense of intelligence, like something was responding. It's a very interesting, weird story. But it continues because later on, the ranch was actually purchased by a billionaire named Robert Bigelow, which is a funny last name. He founded the National Institute for Discovery Science to study the property. And this is where Skinwalker Ranch separates itself from normal folklore, because it got so big and so popular and so famous. I mean, I'm assuming if you look into anything paranormal in the United States, you're going to see something about skinwalkers and Skinwalker Ranch. They've gotten really big, especially this past decade, which is weird, because when I was a younger kid, I'd never heard anything about them. So I thought they were so interesting when I first heard about them in like the 6th grade. But anyways, Bigelow brought in physicists, biologists, surveillance teams, motion sensors, infrared cameras. They tried everything, and they tried their best to study it. There's even a documentary on the entirety of Skinwalker Ranch and the study, and there's multiple different descriptions of things that happened. One investigator reported seeing a massive humanoid figure watching them from the tree line, and described it as taller than the normal man, and it was glowing faintly. But despite these millions, oh my god, millions of dollars in research, the National Institute for Discovery Science shut down operations without delivering a clear conclusion. Bigelow later stated publicly that he was convinced something non-human was interacting with the ranch, but never specified as to what that something was. Years later, it was revealed that the Pentagon funded a program called Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which investigated UFO phenomena, and Skinwalker Ranch was reportedly one of the sites of interest. That revelation reignited everything, because now the narrative isn't just strange ranch in Utah. It's the government was studying this strange ranch in Utah, which is a very American flavor of paranoia. And the pattern that makes this thing so strange is the combination of everything. You got skinwalkers, your Native American burial ground lore stuff. You got the poltergeist. You got the ghost thing. You got a little bit of the Bell Witch. And these weird coincidences just keep coming into play. Just boom, 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 like fastball after fastball. And to top it all off, aliens, government conspiracies, and cover-ups too? It's all very strange. This place feels less like a haunted place and more like a tarred reality. Some researchers and armchair scientists say it's an interdimensional overlap. Whatever that means, what I assume it means is that there's 2 dimensions and they converge at Skinwalker Ranch. Some people say it's actually just military testing or radiation was dumped there at one point and it's causing a bunch of weird things. Some people say it's a psychological condition or it's just an elaborate hoax that everyone has bought into, layered over real but rather mundane events. But there's no single explanation that can really account for everything that's been reported here. Skinwalker Ranch definitely messes with something deeper than a fear of monsters. It's showing that the universe might not even be stable. There could be interdimensional rifts. Like I just said, it's talking about how different observation can help change these outcomes and places where rules don't even apply. It's weirder than if there was just some creature in the woods. But it's also pretty deeply American. A ranch, wide open land, private property, government conspiracy, indigenous legends, and probably the disrespect of every single one of those things. It's really just the perfect storm. So next on the tier list is the White House Ghost. And I'll tell you what, this one's a little interesting. But it's also really self-explanatory. There are ghosts in the White House. That's pretty much it. There's a bunch of stories of that kind that relate to this. The most famous spirit that is said to haunt the White House is Abraham Lincoln. Most people have claimed to see him, the most famous story being that Winston Churchill reportedly walking out in the middle of the night in the White House, and he just happened to see Lincoln's ghost chilling by the fireplace. To which I believe Winston Churchill said, "Good day, sir. There's a lot of other ghosts that they say are out there. Abigail Adams is said to hang the laundry in the East Room. You know, just kind of hangs out. Get it? Hangs out. Anyways. Andrew Jackson, apparently, his presence is often linked to unexplained laughter and cold spots within the White House. And then there's Dolly Madsen, and she is often seen protecting the Rose Garden. That's James Madison's wife, by the way. She's the one who ran out with the George Washington portrait, which is a really famous American scene. And what makes these legends so different than just a random haunted house is kind of who's telling it. These aren't just a bunch of dipshits with like Ouija boards. These are presidents, diplomats, military officers, and many lifelong skeptics who mentioned it sort of offhandedly. I've actually been lucky enough to have been to the White House a couple of times. I used to live in D.C. And I actually went on a date there at one point with a staffer, and I was able to see a lot of the places where there's supposed to be ghosts and hauntings and stuff. Now, did I see anything? No. Did I go through a cold spot? Potentially. But it was November, so it was cold outside. But yeah, it's just an interesting story, and it kind of gives the White House a little more depth. Makes it a little more interesting. But this is a relatively famous case. I mean, this has been featured in the Venture Bros, for Christ's sake, so it still lands on our top Iceberg tier. So the next one is something I also have a personal story with, that being the Chupacabra. This one is classic, everyone knows the Chupacabra, and I'm going to say it right now. Tier 1, typically, again, these are the stuff you're going to see in Scooby-Doo movie, or a couple YouTube videos, whatever you call it. Or Fallout 76, weirdly enough, has like 4 or 5 of these on tier 1 and 2. But the Chupacabra is a really famous story. Chupacabra in Spanish means the word goat sucker, and this is because the first story of it was a goat in Puerto Rico, had all of its blood drained from it, and people freaked out. This whole story exploded in the mid-1990s. The witness descriptions are kind of all over the place. The original description was a weird lizard vampire thing. Very alien, very strange looking, very creepy. But a lot of it has really changed over time, and it's mostly the ones that go into Mexico and the southern U.S. The depiction of it is more hairless dog, mangy, feral creature. And it's a really important split because it fractures the legend into 2 camps. The original Puerto Rican, the alien reptilian with quills down the back, large glowing eyes, very unnatural, and the mainland version, which is sometimes just a crazy dog creature, almost Sasquatch-like. If you hate the Scooby-Doo description, which I mean, obviously Scooby-Doo did their research, guys. It's Scooby-Doo. Velma had that one figured out, right? But that's the Sasquatch-esque version. It's a very strange dichotomy between the two. And this one, I have a personal story with. I do live in Texas. I was going to football practice early in the morning, and one of my buddies comes up into the locker room. You know, we're all just dicking around in there, and he says, "Dude, I thought I saw something outside when I was driving up here." We're like, what are you talking about, dude? He saw, supposedly, a pretty big creature about the size of a big dog, like Great Dane almost, is kind of what he said. Scooby-Doo reference again. But it was running across the highway. And then it chased after his car for a minute. Now, how true is this story? I don't really know. But it definitely falls in line with the hairless dog phenomenon. And a lot of times when people see these things, the chupacabra they're seeing is unfortunately a dog with mange. And it's very sad. Stray animals do exist here, and you hate to see it, but it has happened. But this is some of those urban legends that almost everyone in America knows about. It's not quite Bigfoot, but come on, it's the chupacabra. It'll come to your farm, it'll eat your animals, and it leaves before you can stop it. As we move on to the next tier in this great iceberg of ours, I want to say thank you to the person who made this iceberg. Say thank you, everyone. Their name's here. But I can tell you something about the person who made this, and I don't know them. They're an anonymous stranger on Reddit that I found. But I can tell you that they're a Harry Potter fan, and I can tell you why I know that. And it's because the Thunderbird is on this tier list. And the Thunderbird is not all that well known in the, in the urban legend sense. But it is well known by Harry Potter fans because it is one of the mascots of the American Wizarding School houses. Think Gryffindor, but this time it's America and it's a Thunderbird. And so you might be asking yourself, hey, Dr. Soapbox, what is a Thunderbird? And the Thunderbird is super freaking cool, dude. It is awesome. It is not a modern urban legend in the typical sense. It is one of the oldest supernatural creatures in North America, and it's rooted in indigenous mythology long before the United States ever even existed. And it spans many tribes across the Great Plains, the Pacific Northwest, and the Southwest. The Thunderbird is described as a massive bird being so powerful that thunder is the sound of its wings flapping. Lightning flashes from its beaks and eyes. And storms follow wherever it flies. Now, you might have heard that and said, wow, that is the coolest thing I've ever heard. How can I see one of these? And I'll tell you how. If you've ever seen a totem pole, you see a big eagle on it, that's the Thunderbird. Now, granted, sometimes it's Thunderbird. It's cool. It's seen on many totem poles, and if you've ever gone into any tourist trap area or even just a Native American casino, you will see it. So, in many traditions, the Thunderbird is not really necessarily evil. It's usually kind of chill. It's a guardian. It promotes balance, and sometimes it's even used as a weapon against monsters or humans that broke sacred laws or were just being really naughty boys. But not all versions are benevolent either. Some stories describe Thunderbirds that snatch animals or people from the ground, which, in my opinion, this is a giant bird. It needs a healthy diet and it's got to get in that protein somehow. But they also are depicted battling giant serpents, sick, underwater monsters, sick. Speaking of which, underwater monsters in America, they're all just Loch Ness Monster ripoffs. It's messed up. I'd argue Scotland has the right to sue. That's my opinion. But Thunderbirds are also said to live on top of mountains or above the clouds, which is super cool because mountains are cool. And most of the time, they're only seen during massive storms, which makes sense. But what pushes the Thunderbird into the territory of Iceberg is the modern sightings of it. During the late 1800s and early 1900s, newspaper reports claim people would see the bird with wingspans of 20 to 30 feet, which is pretty big. It would talk about creatures casting shadows over an entire field, flying monsters, sometimes even people thinking that pterodactyls have risen from the dead. One famous account even claims that 2 cowboys shot a gigantic bird in the Arizona desert, though no physical evidence survived because they were lying. Skeptics often say that it's misidentified condors, which are big birds, exaggerated storm clouds, which is possible. Sometimes it's just folklore mixed with fear, but believers point out something important. These legends appear independently across different cultures long before modern communication. Different tribes, different regions, same core idea of a godlike bird tied to storms. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Long before aliens or cryptids or even conspiracies, People were already trying to figure out what was in the sky. But we're going to go ahead and move on to the next one, which is a little more real, unfortunately, and that is the Kennedy curse.
Nothing bad ever happens to the Kennedys!
The Kennedy curse is the belief that the Kennedy family, famously John F. Kennedy, Bobby, Robert, JFK Jr., a lot of their lives ended in tragedy. And it starts with the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963. JFK is assassinated in Dallas while serving as president in an event so shocking it permanently scars the American psyche. I actually have in my office a newspaper from the Fort Worth Star, which is again in DFW, right next to the city of Dallas, that from the day it happened. And it's really a tragic thing because John F. Kennedy was pretty universally considered a good president. But the curse continues. Bobby Kennedy was also assassinated in 1968. That's only 5 years later. And he was campaigning for president. That's JFK's brother, by the way. Then Edward Kennedy survives the, and bear with me for this pronunciation, the Chappaquiddick incident. But his passenger did not survive. That ruined his presidential ambitions before they really got started. Multiple Kennedy children have also died young from things like plane crashes, overdoses, accidents, and illnesses. And prominent heirs have fallen before they've even reached power. By the late 20th century, the pattern feels pretty much relentless. John F. Kennedy Jr. died in a plane crash while running for senator against, funny enough, Hillary Rodham Clinton. And if you follow the QAnon conspiracy stuff, he's actually alive and well, guys. And he will come back, I promise. QAnon did say so. But a lot of the explanations are actually pretty rational. Sometimes extreme wealth and fame, like the Kennedys have had, can put targets on your back. High-risk lifestyles can also compound these consequences, but it's not just the Kennedys were unlucky. It's that they were unlucky again and again and again. Even RFK, the most recent Kennedy in power, he's got a worm in his brain, and it's telling him what to do, guys. But a lot of people really do believe that something or someone killed the Kennedys and caused this Kennedy curse. If you want to get into the more conspiratorial side of things, people claim it's the CIA and that they paid the mob or they worked with the mob to kill him. That's what some people say happened. And funny enough, I was actually told by a mob member myself, or former mob member myself, that that's how it went down. So just letting y'all know. Little PSA. So the next on this tier is the story of the vanishing hitchhiker. And this one's really a classic. I've heard this story so many times in many different forms. It's a global urban legend, but the American one is the one that most people actually know. So a driver, usually late at night, picks someone up on a dark road, usually a rural road, not like an interstate or anything. But the passenger is quiet, polite, maybe a little off or weird, sometimes just cold. Sometimes they wear old-fashioned clothes, but they give an address from the backseat. At some point, the driver will look back and the hitchhiker will be gone. No open door, no sound, no explanation. When the driver goes to the address the hitchhiker gave, they're always told the same thing. Oh, they died years ago, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes the hitchhiker is said to be going home. Sometimes they warn the driver of an upcoming accident. Sometimes they leave something behind, like a jacket that later vanishes too. I've heard this story many different times. Sometimes it's a woman who's been caught in the rain, and they drive, she vanishes in the back seat. They look, and there's still a puddle in the back seat, but she's nowhere to be found. This legend is really powerful because it's pretty consistent across time and place. Versions of the story appear in America, Europe, Latin America, Asia. Different roads, different decades, same setting. And folklorists believe the story taps into deeper fears. Driving alone at night can be kind of a scary experience. Trusting strangers is horrifying sometimes. The boundary between life and death can be really thin on an empty road. There's also the psychological angle. Fatigue, darkness, and expectation can create false memories. But that explanation doesn't kill the story because a lot of people want it to be true. The Vanishing Hitchhiker sits so high on this tier list because, again, it's a story that's been told millions of times before in almost every single way. Almost everyone has a story where they're driving late at night and something weird or creepy happens. I have one myself, but this one just seems to hit a different chord. So the next one is probably one of the most famous things of all time now, and it wasn't that way when I was a kid. I remember first hearing about this next topic and thinking it was the creepiest almost coolest thing ever. But to give you a hint of what it is, a very popular YouTuber has this in his name. Can anyone guess it? That's okay, I'm just messing with you. I'll give you the answer. It's Wendigos, and the YouTuber is Wendigoon, by the way. But hopefully he doesn't turn out to be a cannibal. But this one's a really bleak one. Wendigos come from the Algonquian folklore, also the Cree, and unlike a lot of things in Tier 1, this legend was never really meant to be entertaining or folksy. It was just bad. It was a bad omen of sorts. It's actually bad to talk about Wendigo. It's you're not supposed to do it. Kind of like Goatman. But I'm doing it anyways. But this is really a warning story. And when I say it's really a warning story, I really mean this was a warning story. It's associated with winter, starvation, isolation, and the common thread is cannibalism. At its core, the legend says this: a human who resorts to cannibalism, especially during desperate winter conditions, can become a Wendigo. And they're not just morally ruined, but physically and spiritually transformed. Now, descriptions vary, but the common traits include gaunt, skeletal appearances, sunken eyes, elongated limbs, a heart of ice, and endless hunger. This is also in Fallout 76. Here's one on screen now. Here's a video of me killing one. Some versions portray it as a towering monster, others describe it as something worse. A person who looks mostly human, but is no longer one. And what makes the Wendigo so especially unsettling is that it's an allegorical theme of hunger, starvation, desperation, and how that exact desperation can turn you into a monster. There are some cases where people, legitimately, these are real, have claimed to become Wendigo. Now granted, normally this is just people who eat their family, it's not a pretty sight, and they're like, guys, come on, I'm crazy, obviously, I'm a Wendigo. And they really aren't. But the story is really cool. There are like these Native American tales, almost like your classical knights chasing out a dragon, but it's like a Native American hunter chasing down a Wendigo. And they say they can only be killed with a blade covered in white hot ash, which will melt that ice heart. But that's pretty sick. I mean, that's cool, guys. That's really cool. Also, Wendigos don't have antlers on their heads. People get it mixed up with skinwalkers a lot. They can't transform. They can't shapeshift. That's not how they work. It's wrong. It's an Americanization or Westernization of it. I don't know. It's not quite right. But anthropologists believe that the legend functions as something of a social safeguard, an extreme deterrent against cannibalism. And there is an actual thing called Wendigo psychosis, and it's when people believe that they were Wendigo, like I mentioned earlier. But Wendigos are super widely known nowadays. It's why it's in Tier 1 now. It's super common, everyone's heard of them, they're everywhere, but they're still really fascinating and rather cool. And next is the infamous Skinwalker, which again, a lot of people get mixed up with Wendigos. But Skinwalkers are also misrepresented in the media a lot, and I used to be a staunch defender of that misrepresentation. Don't get me wrong, I thought it was way creepier, but the actual version of a Skinwalker is still pretty creepy itself. And it's not a cryptid in the Bigfoot sense. It's, frankly, something darker and more taboo. The legend comes from the Navajo tradition, particularly in the American Southwest, and if you've ever driven through Navajo Nation in New Mexico or Arizona, you'll see a lot of that culture out there. But at its core, a skinwalker is a witch. Now, witch is a term that gets thrown out a lot. I highly recommend watching Lore Lodge if you want to hear more about witches, skinwalkers, and the like, because they actually go into a lot of the cultural aspects of it, which I really don't have time to do in this video, but it's really cool and really fascinating. But a witch is not necessarily a pointed hat, cackling, wicked, witch of the west vibes. A witch is anyone who uses magic in a bad way, or sometimes a quote-unquote good way. And at its core, a skinwalker is a witch, a human who gains supernatural abilities by committing acts so morally corrupt that they sever themselves from humanity. And the common trait of a skinwalker includes being able to shapeshift into animals, like a coyote, or an owl, a wolf, deer, whatever. They can mimic human voices, normally loved ones. This is where you get those really creepy skinwalker stories of, oh, my wife called to me, but she was in the other room, and it made me want to go outside into the darkness of the woods. A lot of them say they have superhuman speed or endurance, glowing, unnatural eyes, and most of them appear in night or isolated homes. But unlike werewolves or anything, this isn't an uncontrollable curse. Skinwalkers choose to become what they are. That's what makes them so terrifying. These are witches who legitimately chose this lifestyle to gain power, wealth, whatever. They also eat people. That's part of the story. But skinwalkers don't attack randomly. They target people. And there's a lot of different stories around skinwalkers. Some people will say they'll hear knocking at their doors at night, but never someone entering. They hear their names being called from outside. You'll always hear those where someone will be walking in the middle of the woods and hear their name called out by like their mother, but their mother ain't out there. Some people say they watch from rooftops or ridgelines, following people, and others say they can follow cars at impossible speeds. I've heard many stories from friends I had out in the military who were stationed out west, and they say they'd be driving around late at night, they'd see a coyote on the road, and sometimes they'd slow down not to hit said coyote, and then the coyote would get up on both hind legs and just run away. It's pretty creepy stuff. But skinwalkers often target people associated with grudges or jealousy, revenge, power. And the legend serves as both a supernatural explanation and a moral warning about envy and greed, and what happens when someone breaks sacred laws for personal gain. But the real scary part of this is that people who grew up hearing these stories, they don't treat them like folklore. Like I said earlier in the video, saying the word skinwalker is very taboo. So again, if I'm not here, you know why. But them treating it as something real gives it a lot of credence. But now this makes Skinwalker Ranch make much more sense, because maybe it was just a witch messing with them. Who knows? But again, skinwalkers are tier 1 because they're so widely known. Everyone knows about skinwalkers now. There's been memes galore about them, which is unfortunate because I liked them so much when they were kind of underground, a little more niche, you know? Talking about skinwalkers used to feel extra creepy and taboo. Now it's just kind of a joke.
So if Bigfoot is like the Michael Jordan of the cryptid world, Mothman has to be like Kobe Bryant or LeBron. Because he's a big deal. He's a cryptid legend. So this begins in 1966 in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where multiple residents report seeing a tall, winged, humanoid creature with glowing red eyes, hovering near like a abandoned TNT factory outside of town, which is the most Scooby-Doo opening to this story possible. I love it. There's a lot of different depictions of the Mothman. Most of them are pretty consistent though. It's kind of a rough human-shaped thing with massive wings, not necessarily a visible head or neck, even though the statue in Point Pleasant kind of shows this as a more humanoid creature with a really finely sculpted ass for some reason. Someone took the time to do that. No judgment here. But the eyes of the Mothman often are depicted as glowing red eyes, which is pretty cool. People that saw him reported paralysis, dread, sometimes car engine failure, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. Sightings continued for over a year, and locals panicked. Newspapers picked it up, and some national attention even followed. There's even a story of an Appalachian woman beating up Mothman with a broom because it was trying to steal her baby, which is so Appalachia, I love it. But then, tragically, on December 15th, 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed during rush hour. It killed 46 people, and after that, the sightings simply stopped. And that's kind of what made the Mothman a legend in a way. The tragedy that followed the appearance of Mothman and the no sightings of him after, or at least less sightings of him after, fueled the idea that Mothman appeared to either warn the people of the upcoming disaster or was the cause himself. Now, skeptics will argue that this was just misidentified owls or sandhill cranes, and those are pretty big birds, by the way. I have a picture on screen here. And some people say it was just mass hysteria, which is definitely possible and plausible. And then the coincidence that happened with the tragedy just made people think that the stories were more real. But believers point to the timing. It wasn't just one sighting, and it was never just one witness. Dozens of people reported the same thing right before the disaster. Mothman sits high on the iceberg because, well, everyone knows about him. He's one of the big selling points of the game, Fallout 76. He was a big deal in that game. He has a Fortnite skin, for Christ's sake. That pretty much elevates you into pop culture icon status. Also, I'd recommend watching the BuzzFeed Unsolved video on him, mostly because I think those videos are funny and I like them. But yeah, that's the Mothman. So this next one I had legit never ever heard about in my life. And this also points to the creator of this Iceberg being a Harry Potter fan, because this is also a Harry Potter house icon. But it's called the Wampus Cat. And this feels really regional, but apparently it's a little bit bigger than that. And it's also from Appalachia, who could have fucking guessed, especially parts of West Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, and North Carolina. Though some versions trace its roots back to Cherokee myth, which I am part Cherokee. So theoretically, this thing's coming from me. The depictions and descriptions vary, but common traits include a large cat-like creature, sometimes panther-sized or bigger, glowing yellow or blue eyes, a scream that's described as blood-curdling or woman-like, which is actually just most cougar screams in general, and it moves silently through the forest and ridgelines. In some versions, the Wampus Cat is just a monster, an apex predator stalking the woods at night. In some other versions, it's something else entirely. One popular origin story claims that the Wampus Cat was once a woman who violated a sacred boundary, either spying on forbidden rituals or committing some taboo act, and was cursed or transformed into this creature. That theme should sound pretty familiar by now. Punishment through transformation. This happens all the time in legends like this. Many people blame the Wampus Cat for missing livestock, unexplained screams in the hills, attacks on hunters, and animals found mutilated but not fully eaten. In the 1900s, newspapers even reported organized hunts to kill the Wampus Cat, complete with traps, posses, and alleged captures, though no body ever held up to scrutiny. Some skeptics say it's just a mountain lion or bobcats, and a collective fear amplified by isolation. But a lot of Appalachian urban legends, the Wampus Cat isn't really about the animal, it's about the woods at night. That feeling of something beyond the tree line watching you. The knowledge that the mountains don't belong to you once the sun goes down. Also, coincidentally, I found there's a high school in Texas, and their mascot is the Wampus Cat. So that's pretty fun. So tell me what you know about the Zodiac Killer. It's one of the most popular serial killers in America, which is kind of a weird sentence to say, popular serial killers and all, but a lot of people do know him, and a lot of urban legends amplify what he did. Or what he did caused a lot of urban legends, it doesn't matter. The point is, this next one is called The Hook on the Door. It's a very popular one. It's one I've heard many times as a kid, teenager, and even adult. So the story normally goes like this. A young couple is parked on a secluded area, Lover's Lane, forest pull-off, somewhere quiet. They're listening to the radio when a news bulletin interrupts the music. A dangerous killer has escaped and he's on the loose. He has a hook for a hand. The couple gets nervous and eventually decides to leave, but when they get home, they notice something hanging on the car door handle. A bloody hook. Sometimes it's on the passenger door, sometimes it's embedded in the metal, sometimes it's swinging gently, just like it was left there. And that's the end. There's no chase, no monster reveal, no explanation, and what makes the hook so effective is how little it gives you. The killer was close enough to even touch the car. Close enough that leaving probably saved them, just barely. Folklorists often describe this legend as a morality tale, especially aimed at teenagers. Don't go isolated places, don't stay out too late, and don't ignore warning signs. It probably plays into abstinence a little bit too, guys, like, come on. But that's besides the point. But that meaning only really explains why adults pass it down, not necessarily why it works as a horror itself. The real terror is the proximity. The idea that the danger didn't announce itself and that it can be right outside, quietly waiting. And you only realize it after you're safe enough to look back. And if you want to look at a more modern aspect of it, look at zip ties. This is a different urban legend / kind of based in reality. I've heard it many times that sometimes, especially a woman coming out of like grocery stores, will see a zip tie on their door handle of their car. Sometimes the woman will leave it on, sometimes they'll cut it off and there's no issue. But the claim is that traffickers, criminals, or whatever will use that to mark vehicles or identify targets. I've heard the story of a lady cutting off a zip tie, and while she's fidgeting with it, someone came up and tried to get her. I've also heard stories of people just saying whatever and leaving them on their car, and then when they get home, they forget to take it off and their house gets broken into later. These are important distinctions. Distinctions probably isn't the right word, but this shows that fear. That hook on the door, so to speak. There's no verified evidence necessarily that zip ties are a real trafficking method. Law enforcement agencies have repeatedly said this. Most cases are pranks or parking lot litter, just weird misunderstood objects. But it doesn't really matter because the urban legend is still plausible. It makes sense to people. I've also heard this on trash cans, car doors, or even doorknobs of your house. The zip tie story spreads for the exact same reason the hook did. It's non-violent until it isn't. It suggests maybe surveillance rather than just attack. And it makes you reevaluate sometimes your everyday safety. In the 1950s, the danger was a killer escaped from an asylum. In the 2020s, the danger can be an invisible system watching you. Someone trying to kidnap you. Someone trying to take you away from your loved ones. These are real fears. And that's why this one fits comfortably into tier 1. This is something that people probably should be aware of. It's definitely really, really scary. Okay, so now we have the Flatwoods Monster, which is another Fallout 76 creature, which is a really big trend I'm noticing in tier 1 and 2. But the Flatwoods Monster comes straight out of 1950s America, when the Cold War, UFO panic, and sci-fi paranoia were all colliding. The first incident happened in 1952 in Flatwoods. Can you guess where Flatwoods is? Would you guess West Virginia? Wow, what a coincidence. Everything is isolated in this little tiny state. Half of these urban legends have come from there at this point, which is so funny. But on September 12th, 1952, local youths and a woman named Kathleen May investigated a glowing object that appeared to crash into a hillside. Witnesses described encountering a towering man-like figure with a red face, glowing eyes, and a spade-shaped hood. The being reportedly emitted a pungent, metallic odor and glided toward them, causing the group to flee in panic. A later investigation revealed skid marks and a lingering smell, but no physical creature. While early newspapers suggested an alien invasion, later investigation proposed a more mundane explanation. Committee for Skeptical Inquiry researcher Joe Nickel concluded that the monster was likely, you guessed it, a barn owl, illuminated by lights, which again, trending with Mothman, apparently there are just a lot of giant owls with glowing eyes that freak people out. The fiery aerial object was likely a meteor, but with Cold War anxiety and mass hysteria amplifying the event. This thing had a pretty big cultural impact. The story captured national attention and even inspired coverage from outlets like Life magazine, and even a Project Blue Book inquiry. The legend still sticks around through the Flatwoods Monster Museum in nearby Sutton, local festivals, and even those weird monster-shaped chairs that are on screen right now. And like I said earlier, it also appeared in video games like Fallout 76 and in some TV shows. But yeah, that's why it's on tier 1. It's Fallout. And now for a very classic urban legend that I'm going to try and say as fast as humanly possible to move through it. So, I'm going to say 3 things to start. Sewer alligators. Wow. So the urban legend goes like this. People get pet alligators while on vacation, like in Florida or something. It's cute, small, then it gets bigger. Too big. So instead of dealing with it, they flush it down the toilet or dump it in a storm drain. Down there, it survives and grows. And now there's something with teeth living beneath the city. Legend really takes off in the 1930s when newspapers began publishing sensational stories about alligators allegedly found in the New York City sewers. Some articles are just jokes, some are exaggerations, some might be real, but the line blurs pretty fast. This is such a popular urban legend, there are multiple superheroes that have evil crocodile or alligator type things living in the sewers. I immediately think of the Lizard in Spider-Man or Killer Croc in Batman. These are really popular urban legends, so no wonder they're on tier 1, but we will move on. And now we're officially back to aliens. So we're talking about the Men in Black, and I love the Men in Black, mostly because the movies are great. Will Smith, Tommy Lee Jones, come on, it's good. Men in Black 3 is also really good with Josh Brolin. That guy can act. But anyways, the Men in Black are mysterious figures in UFO folklore. They're often described as shadowy government agents or extraterrestrial agents who appear to intimidate or silence witnesses of UAPs. The legend emerged in the mid-20th century America and remains a staple of UFO and conspiracy lore. So the first notable case is Albert K. Bender in 1953. He claimed that 3 men in dark suits warned him to stop investigating UFOs. The phenomenon quickly spread throughout UFO research circles and magazines, quickly becoming part of the post-war American mythology tied to Cold War anxieties about secrecy and surveillance. Witnesses typically describe the Men in Black as motionless, pale-skinned men in identical black attire, driving black cars, and exhibiting robot or even alien-like mannerisms. They allegedly arrived soon after a UFO sighting, questioned witnesses, and threatened consequences for sharing information. Some accounts suggest they even possess unusual speech patterns or telepathic abilities, reinforcing theories of non-human origins. Explanations can vary from government agents protecting classified programs to extraterrestrials disguising themselves as humans. Folklorists and psychologists often interpret these stories as manifestations of paranoia, social tension, or cultural myth-making about the hidden power of surveillance. The Men in Black motif functions as a cautionary symbol about truth, suppression, and distrust of authority. One of my favorite depictions of them was actually this guy who said that they had Men in Black come up to him and that their face looked like powdered or painted, like that's why they looked so pale, and they had heavy, outdated makeup, lips that were overly red and poorly shaped, and hair that even looked like a fake wig. So that's really strange, and I just love it. And the cultural legacy of it, I mean, obviously the movies are great. Numerous documentaries, books, and even television shows even mention the Men in Black. Like, it's a big deal. And it remains intertwined with UFO conspiracy narratives and modern discussions of secrecy, unexplained phenomena, and the blurred line between myth and reality. It's one of my favorites, really. It's a great urban legend. And yeah, I'd love to do maybe a whole video on it. Maybe. Possibly. But who knows if I will ever get around to doing that. Next on the tier list is Lizzie Borden. Lizzie Andrew Borden. Sorry, I forgot her middle name. But she was born in 1860 and lived until 1927. She was an American woman who was tried and acquitted for the 1892 hatchet murders of her father and stepmother in Fall River, Massachusetts. This sensational case captured national attention and became one of the most infamous unsolved crimes in U.S. history, inspiring books, films, and the enduring rhyme, Lizzie Borden took an axe. So Borden was born the younger daughter of a prosperous businessman, Andrew Borden, and his first wife, Sarah Moore. After her mother's death, her father remarried to Abby Durfee Gray. Despite family wealth, the Bordens lived frugally, causing tension between the sisters and their stepmother. Lizzie was active in her congregational church and local charities, but lived under strict Victorian expectations. On August 4th, 1892, Andrew and Abby Borden were found bludgeoned to death in their home. Only Lizzie and the family's Irish maid, Bridget Sullivan, were present. Investigators found circumstantial evidence, inconsistent statements, and an attempt to buy poison the day before, as well as a burned dress. No murder weapon or direct proof emerged, but the brutality of the crime shocked the nation and turned Fall River into a media circus. Lizzie's trial in June 1893 became a 19th century media spectacle. Her defense, led by former Massachusetts Governor George Robinson, argued that the state's case was entirely circumstantial. The judge barred her inquest testimony as inadmissible, and after about an hour of deliberation, an all-male jury found her not guilty. Public opinion, however, remained divided, and she was ostracized in Fall River afterward. Following the acquittal, Lizzie and her sister Emma inherited their father's estate and moved into a new home called Maplecroft. Isn't it cool? Isn't it cool that old homes used to have names? Why don't homes have names anymore? Now she's like, yep, that's my house. It's lame. We should start naming homes. Like Bree's home in Skyrim. That's cool. Anyways, later the sisters grew estranged and Lizzie lived quietly until her death from pneumonia in 1927. But her story endures through the countless retellings from a 1975 movie, The Legend of Lizzie Borden, to a 2018 film called Lizzie. And the former family home now operates as the Lizzie Borden House, a museum and inn famous for its haunted tours. But the reason this story is kind of weird is because of the rhyme. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her father 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her mother 41. And what a strange nursery rhyme that is, by the way, to tell your children that. That's insane. But yeah, that unsolved mystery has become an urban legend. The ghost stories and the hauntedness of the Lizzie Borden house, and frankly what actually happened if it wasn't Lizzie, make this one stick around. It's pretty popular too, so there you have it. But I think this is more in the urban legend iceberg because of the rhyme. It's so damn catchy. I'm gonna think about the rest of the day, truth be told. So if you grew up in the 2010s, and really the late 2000s, trick-or-treating was still around. And I mean, it's still around today, but it's not to the same degree it was. We were all out there as kids, on a random night, completely unsupervised, going around the neighborhood, and it was awesome. But there was a big worry and concern, and truth be told, it kind of ruined trick-or-treating for everyone. And it's on our tier list right here. Poisoned Halloween candy and razor blades ruined Halloween. The legend says that every Halloween, someone is out there handing out candy that's poisoned or laced with drugs or hiding razor blades, glass, needles, whatever. It's one of the most persistent fears in American culture, and almost everyone heard it growing up. When I was a kid, sometimes my parents would actually check candy. Schools would warn us, hospitals supposedly offered x-rays for trick-or-treat bags, local news ran the story like every year, and yet it never happened. I never heard a story of anyone I knew having any problems with anything. It's actually really funny on social media. I even saw someone talk about how silly the idea was that they would throw away good drugs on Halloween candy just to mess with some kids. But there is some truth to the story as well. In 1974, Ronald Clark O'Brien poisoned his own child's Halloween candy with cyanide to collect insurance money. And he tried to blame some stranger. That case scared the nation, and from that moment on, the legend exploded, despite the fact that the danger didn't even come from strangers at all. And what made the legend so powerful is it weaponizes trust in the neighborhood. It turns communal tradition into a threat, and it targets children specifically. Just like the Hook, the real fear isn't the violence, it's the proximity. Someone close, someone unnoticed, something that blends right in. And you might not know exactly what candy it came from, and if something happened, who would you even blame? Over time, the legend has shifted with the era. Razor blades became needles, poison became drugs, apples became factory sealed candy that might even be tampered with. The details change, but the fear doesn't. This is a universally known story, and it's something your parents probably freaked out over too at one point. That's why a lot of times parents now go with their kids. I never really had that as a kid. When I was in 4th grade, we would just run out on our own, come back that night while our parents had a Halloween party or something. But now I don't really see anyone without their parents, and a lot of times trunk or treating has become the big thing. It's where parents, at a church, they know exactly what's happening and everything is super controlled. But yeah, it's definitely a scary thing, and hopefully it's not real and it never really happens, but the legend persists. And now for the ultimate Facebook mom urban legend, and that's that Elvis Presley is still alive. Every single year, every single goddamn year, I always see someone's mom on Facebook post about, hey, we found this old man, and we think it's Elvis Presley. He was in witness protection, but he's good now. He's still alive. He was always alive. I've seen this for years, decades, since I've been alive. Here's the story. Elvis Presley, God rest his soul, dies in 1977. Yet, no one wants him to stay dead. Almost immediately, people start claiming that they've seen him at gas stations, grocery stores, working mundane jobs, living quietly under an alias. The story goes that Elvis faked his death to escape fame, or was pressured by the government, or simply wanted peace after being consumed by being a celebrity. The sightings explode in tabloids, call-in radio shows, and later, of course, Facebook. Grainy photos with red circles, "Look at his eyes" captions, claims that Elvis was secretly a preacher, truck driver, or someone's neighbor's uncle. The comment section was always filled with stuff like, "I always knew it, I always knew Elvis was alive." This one actually makes me mad. And that's what makes the Elvis sighting sick. Unlike most celebrity rumors, it's how sudden and unsatisfying his death felt to the public. There was no closure, no decade-long decline in the spotlight. He was just gone. Kind of like Kurt Cobain in that regard, but at least he didn't die at 27. Add in the conflicting autopsy rumors, sealed records, and his massive cultural presence, and people simply refuse to let him leave. Elvis sightings aren't really about Elvis, they're about denial. The same thing has happened with JFK, Tupac, Princess Diana, and even JFK Jr. like we covered earlier. But Elvis was America's first modern mythic celebrity. Losing him felt like losing an era, and Folklore rushed to fill in the gap. That's why it's in tier 1. It's super common to hear about it. Facebook moms still claim it. My grandmother has posted about this stuff before too. Love you, Grandma. Shout out. Next up is the Jersey Devil. It is such a stupid one. The Jersey Devil is a legendary cryptid rooted in New Jersey folklore in the Pine Barrens region. Funny enough, one of the scariest stories I've ever heard was located in the Pine Barrens, but it doesn't have anything to do with the Jersey Devil, because the Jersey Devil is stupid and not real. It's also known as the Leeds Devil, but it's a famous American figure in the American regional mythology, symbolizing colonial fears and the mystery of the wilderness. The story begins in 1735, and the physical traits of this thing are a hooved, winged goat or horse-headed creature. It's mythical, no scientificness to this. It's also considered a cryptid, which if you read the legend, I don't think it is. But according to the folklore, the Jersey Devil was born in 1735 to a woman known as Mother Leeds in Leeds Point, New Jersey. Cursing her 13th child, I don't blame her, She proclaimed it would be the devil, and upon birth the infant transformed into a winged beast with hooves, a forked tail, and a horse-like head before flying into the Pine Barrens. Some versions of the story tie the creature to colonial Quaker conflicts, notably involving Daniel Leeds and his family, who were vilified by local settlers for pushing occult almanacs and supporting the British Crown. Over time, the Leeds Devil evolved into the Jersey Devil legend. Reports of encounters have persisted for centuries, with a major flap happening in 1909 where hundreds across New Jersey and Pennsylvania claimed to see the strange winged creature, with notable witnesses allegedly including Commodore Stephen Decanter and Joseph Bonaparte. The creature is said to emit a piercing, blood-curdling scream and has been blamed for livestock attacks, eerie nocturnal disturbances. Despite the lack of evidence, its myth endures in newspapers, museums, and tourism across southern New Jersey. The Jersey Devil has inspired extensive media portrayals, including in The X-Files, the film The Barrens, a PlayStation game called Jersey Devil, and even the NHL team, the New Jersey Devils, which adopted the name in 1982. And guess what? It's also in Fallout 76. Who could have guessed it? Everything in Tier 1 is either a fucking Hogwarts house or Fallout 76. But obviously this is Tier 1. It's super famous. I mean, there's an NHL team named after it, which admittedly is really cool. But yeah, pretty simple one, all things considered. Just don't have 13 kids, guys. That's the moral of the story. And with that, that concludes Tier 1 of the American urban legend Iceberg. I want to thank all of you so much for sticking around to the end. Obviously, I'm a really small channel, so I really do appreciate it. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you like what you saw. And don't worry, I'm not going to take a long hiatus. Tier 2 will come out as soon as possible. Thank you again for watching, and have a great rest of your day.